Hello everyone, I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone lately and it got me thinking about something, which is how much luck compared to skill is there in Yu-Gi-Oh compared to other games. I came to the conclusion that Yu-Gi-Oh has a lot more luck, or I'm sorry, has a lot more skill compared to luck than most other card games that at least the ones that I've played, like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering, which I'm going to be using as the prime examples. But before I move forward, I do just want to say that I like all three of the games. I don't think that any of them are better than the others. So anything I say in this video is just a simple preference of mine, and that is just my opinion. So the first thing is going to be how decks are built in all three of the games in comparison to each other. In Yu-Gi-Oh, it's just really simple that you throw together a bunch of cards that you want to use, that you want to play. You look for some combos and stuff. Otherwise, you can play them as you see fit as quickly as you want. But where the luck starts to change in other games is, let's say in Hearthstone, for example, and this is going to be very similar to Magic the Gathering, but starting with Hearthstone, you have a mana curve, which is you gain an extra crystal every turn, and then every turn you can spend crystal costs using the cards. They just call it mana, but just for the sake of not getting it confused with Magic, I'm going to call them crystals. So this isn't one of my decks or anything, it's just some random deck list I found on Google, but it'll say how much mana or crystals a card costs right here. So these are really cheap ones, 1 to 2. They range from 1 to 10 depending on the card, and you have to be really careful about what kind of a balance you use. So like this deck wouldn't work because there's way too many low cost cards. They'd have a little bit of an advantage really early game, but then after a few turns they'd very quickly lose that advantage because these little cards start losing their value really quickly, whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh that doesn't happen. So it's pretty much like any card that you put into your Yu-Gi-Oh deck, it's going to be effective mid, late game, early game. It's going to be effective pretty much all of the game, depending on the card. There are examples, but most of them, depending on your deck, will be effective all game long. Whereas in a game like Hearthstone, you don't have that. These little low cost cards, they're going to stop being effective after a few turns, whereas the higher cost cards, you can't use them at all early game, so you rely on a lot of luck to actually draw into them at the right times and have them when you need them, as opposed to drawing them when you don't need them anymore, because in that case they're not going to do anything, and that just doesn't happen that much in Yu-Gi-Oh. So there's more luck to this kind of a system, because in Yu-Gi-Oh, again, the cards are all active throughout the entire game, so you don't really care all that much when and how you draw into them. You just want to get them and then get them onto the field. And then Magic is kind of similar because it also has mana as opposed to the crystals, and you use these as cost to player cards. Every card has a different kind of cost, and then you tap them and you use that to pay for your cards. So they're very similar in that you can't just play all of your cards every turn as you see fit like in Yu-Gi-Oh, and it just, the luck factor is so much greater there. And then being able to play your cards when you want to without having to wait for the specific times, like I was saying, it's so just, there's so much luck involved in that, whereas Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have that. You can just play them as often as you want. And something I was noticing is that in Hearthstone, I was actually losing to really bad players whenever I got really unlucky, and it was really stupid. I don't like that. If I'm more skillful than my opponent, they can still beat me if they get lucky enough and I get unlucky enough. That does not happen in Yu-Gi-Oh! So that was kind of, it was getting a little bit aggravating. It was like, I know I'm better than you, you're playing bad cards, I have good cards in my deck, whereas you don't, and yet you're winning because you got lucky. Like, they would have a bunch of cards that they could play early game, whereas I didn't get some, because I didn't get any at all, because that's luck that happens. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, it kind of happens, but the odds of it happening are essentially the player's choice. You can choose how many cards you want in your deck that you can activate at any time, as opposed to cards that need specific combos. So you decide your own luck in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Hearthstone, that doesn't work that way, and same goes for Magic, that you need to have some sort of a curve and some balance, which is going to rely a lot on luck. And I just don't like that about other games. That's why I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is superior. Again, though, just my opinion. If someone else doesn't agree, that's perfectly fine. You can think that another game is better, but in my opinion, I just like that there's a lot less luck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And more skill, because if I'm better than a player, I can beat them with skill. I don't need luck. I can use my cards how I envision playing them, and then I'll win because of it, at least most of the time. I mean, luck is still a factor, of course, but the vast majority of times it doesn't have any effect. You can use your skill to win. And finally, to sum this up, it's really annoying when you can't actually gauge why or how you won or lost. Say in Yu-Gi-Oh! Your opponent outplays you. You can tell yourself, okay, well, I need to get better at actually playing my cards and learn what I did wrong, what they did right, and then you can better yourself for that and play better the next time. Or if it did happen to be luck, like maybe they set up a scenario where your opponent top decked a really good card, but they set up the scenario that when they drew that card, they would be in a good position, whereas maybe you couldn't stop that. Then you can think to yourself, well, how did I let that position, or how did I let that happen? What could I have done differently? And then you can better yourself. Or even just, did my opponent have better cards? Did I get countered? I think that's as lucky as Yu-Gi-Oh! Gets, is what kind of a matchup will you have. Although when it comes to side decking and building your deck to not be countered by anything specific, I do think that the player more or less decides that too. And then you get into a game like Hearthstone where it's really, really difficult to tell why you lost sometimes. I mean, did your opponent not play you? Did you get unlucky? Do they have better cards than you? First off, you can't go back and look at your opponent's deck and cards like you can online for Ygopro, which I think is a really awesome feature. Although in person, people, they don't really have a problem telling you what kind of cards they're playing after the match is over. So even in real life, you can ask, hey, what kind of stuff were you playing? I want to know why I lost. And a lot of times they'll be happy to tell you. So it's really easy in Yu-Gi-Oh! To realize how you lost and better yourself from it. But okay, getting back to Hearthstone and Magic, let's say you lose. Again, you don't know which aspect it is, so you can't tell yourself, okay, well, I got outplayed, so I'll just get better at playing my cards. You might not know that it was that. You have to take a guess, because if it was luck, then that's outside of your control. You can't necessarily better yourself if you got outlucked by someone, so you can't really pay that any attention. If your opponent has better cards than you, that's also kind of hard to tell, because what if they just got lucky? You don't absolutely know for sure, although you could still look at it and think, what are the better cards I could have been using? Or if you got outplayed or not. It's just really hard to tell, and I don't really like that about the other games. I really enjoy that in Yu-Gi-Oh! That you can gauge exactly why and how you lost and then better yourself from it. So that's just my opinion, though, that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot more skill compared to luck compared to other games. And anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, subscribe, and stay brutal.